At 28 years old, I was shot and paralyzed from the chest down. I had two options. I could stop and let the things I cannot control me, or I could move forward and put my energy into things that would improve my life and those around me. I chose to move forward and surround myself with risk takers, innovators, and leaders who've chosen the same path. Join us on the journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Forward with me, Derek Herrera. Today's guest is Nick Jones. Nick Jones is a Marine Raider. He's a husband. He's a Navy Cross Recipient, and now serves as a nonprofit leader for Talon's Reach Foundation. Recently, just a few weeks ago, he was awarded the Navy Cross, which, to put into context, is the second highest award given for valor and bravery on the battlefield. And he was awarded this medal, this Navy Cross, because of his actions and his ability to continue to put others' needs ahead of his own while sustaining injuries, severe injuries, personally, on the battlefield in Iraq in 2020. And so we talk a lot about that story, and he opened up and told us amazing details about what he was thinking at that time and how he tried to solve some of the most seemingly insurmountable challenges and problems that he'd ever been confronted with on the battlefield on that day. He's a true American hero. He is incredibly humble. And I'm certain you'll enjoy this episode where we talked about some of the amazing lessons he's learned, including things like what it was like to be around people and see them struggling with adversity and trauma, how compartmentalization of traumatic events can be good or bad depending upon the circumstance, and how you choose to frame the events that have happened, and how to let go of grief and guilt and to move forward with your life and your next mission. If you have any questions about the podcast, please feel free to contact me, forward@derekherrera.com, or you can fill out the contact form on our website, derekherrera.com. You can also message me directly on Instagram or LinkedIn. And lastly, if you enjoy this podcast, I humbly request you consider leaving a review and rating, because if you do, it'll help us to reach new audiences and more people who may be able to benefit from these lessons learned from such amazing people. And so thank you for listening. I'm looking forward to sharing this episode with you. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks for having me. Truly pleasure to be here, man. From connecting a while ago and now being able to hang out with you here. So thank you.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Seriously. Appreciate you making time. I know you're out in North Carolina, busy doing some things with the military, which we'll talk about, but really appreciate making time to come chat and share a little bit about what you're doing with us. And so before we dive in, we'll start from the beginning, and really interested to hear about your time as an enlisted Marine and what made you want to join the Marine Corps and how that went for you for your first enlistment.
Yeah, sure. So I actually grew up, I said this just a couple of days ago in a speech that I had to give, a public speaking event that I had the other day. I actually grew up watching YouTube videos about like the war in Iraq and the invasion for Afghanistan. Because 2001, 9/11 happened when I was, I think, in fourth grade. So I was pretty dang young, but it stuck with me my entire life. When I was in school, I would just watch these YouTube videos and I'd be like, man, that's what I want to do. And then I would end up watching the Marines, and they had all these moto videos on there, and I started getting into that. And then I had a pretty fascinating event happen when I was younger. I went to a martial arts gym, and I had already been watching cool moto videos and military movies, and one of them was Generation Kill. And so I was super psyched. I wanted to be a recon Marine or a sniper, whatever it was. And then at my local gym, here comes in Rudy Reyes, and I see this guy, and I was like, oh man, like this is it. This is what I want to do. And I got to hang out with him for a while. I got to spar with him, and he was just such an inspiration to me at that time. So that's immediately when I knew that's the path I wanted to take. So I ended up graduating early from high school to go into the Marine Corps as soon as I could. As soon as I turned 18, I was there. I enlisted. I tried to go straight into the reconnaissance community. I just had an 03, the basic infantry contract. So didn't have any specifications. When I show up to boot camp, I kept volunteering. I never got picked to go, but long story short, I became a mortarman out of School of Infantry, checked into 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, got to do a MEU on the 31st MEU, came back and found out about the sniper platoon. I hung out with them quite a bit on the ship. Went in for the NDOC, did the NDOC for the 2-5 stay platoon, made it with them, hung out with them for a while, went to Afghanistan. And as soon as I returned from Afghanistan is when I started applying to go to MARSOC. At the time, you had to be an NCO to go, and that's finally when as soon as I picked up corporal, my package was in. So that was kind of a quick down and dirty for my first 4 years in, and
Yeah.
That's
awesome. Yeah. Awesome. I want to back up and draw on a simple point you just mentioned, which was Fruity Rudy Reyes, who is a legend. And I have no idea. I've actually never met someone who's been inspired, personally met someone who's been inspired. I know there's like thousands or I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people maybe who've been inspired by him to go into the Marine Corps. But what an amazing story and like a fortunate circumstance, right? And so, if you don't know, Rudy Reyes is a reconnaissance Marine, and he has this larger than life personality. And he was a reconnaissance Marine in the early days of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And some of his story is chronicled in the books One Bullet Away, Generation Kill, and then Generation Kill, which became a series on HBO. This is a story I remember because my company commander was actually his platoon commander at some point during their time in Iraq. And so he told us some of the stories about Rudy. And then I've met Rudy a few times in person, and he was the only guy who was allowed to play himself on that HBO TV series. And the reason why is because he just has this force of personality, this larger than life personality that no actor could replicate within reason. And so
that's one
that's
definitely not replicable.
Yeah. And so it's amazing that, that you just show up at a martial arts gym one day and start training, right? And he's there. And so cool. So that's really cool. Phenomenal entry into the Marine Corps. And also the YouTube thing too. That was one of the things I was really excited to chat with you about, is because a lot of people give younger generations a bad rap, right? And they give, people a hard time. And I was kind of on that line where people didn't give us as hard of a time because we were still, I was on the cusp of so I'm a millennial, right? I'm 37, but people kind of give us a pass. But then, younger guys like you, right? How old are you
now? 29. I'll be 30 this year.
Yeah. So 29. So 29-year-old, you guys get a bad rap, right? But I think for all the people that give you guys a bad rap, there's just as many kids. I'm actually really bullish on millennials and the younger generations because I think you have more access to more information, generally smarter, educational systems better. There's a lot of things. And I think there's a really strong but silent or seemingly silent majority of people that are out there doing amazing things. And so I'm bullish. And I tell everybody that when they ask me, they're like, oh, what's wrong with this generation? Right. It's like nothing. Wait, let them show you, right? They're going to be amazing and do amazing things.
Yeah, it's just evolving every day. I mean, they're keeping up with the times better than some of us. So it is. I mean, they're learning quicker. Yeah. They're progressing. They're finding new ways. It's actually pretty amazing. Well, I guess I'm a part of that. So
yeah, I'll say I'm talking about you. Yeah, you guys are awesome. So, Yeah, so that's cool. And then the YouTube thing, like, I think I would be in the same boat, right? In my generation, it was watching the movie Navy SEALs and reading
Yeah,
Dick Marcinko books, right? And like Rogue Warrior and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's what drew me to the military and the Naval Academy. Was I wanted to be a special operator. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL until I found out about the Marine Corps and went that path. But yeah, it's amazing. And yeah, and then moving into your enlistment, you know, like I just want to frame that for everybody, right? It's you graduated high school early to enlist during a period of combat operations, knowing full well, exactly what you signed up for, right? Like you didn't sign up for any other reason, obviously, I'm guessing.
that's what I wanted. I wanted to go to war. I mean, I wanted to fight for this country. I was super fortunate growing up where I did in Kansas, and it was just I felt like that was my calling. I was one destined to go to battle. So
Yeah. Yeah. So you enlisted, were in the infantry, did the MEU, which for those of you who don't know is the Marine Expeditionary Unit. It's a deployment where Marines are embarked aboard naval vessels and on ships. I did a MEU. I was a rifle company XO in 2010. Had a great time doing it. They don't talk a lot about those because there's not as many of them, or there weren't as many of them in the past 20 years because people have been deploying straight to Iraq and Afghanistan instead of going on ships. But pre 9/11, this is what the Marine Corps did. This was your deployment: is you'd get on a ship and you'd go out and be pre-positioned, ready to respond to any crises that occur in the region. So you did the MEU, you did Afghanistan. What years were you on the MEU and in Afghanistan?
2011 was the MEU. So there was actually a large tsunami that hit Japan during that time. So we got to, I wouldn't say got to, but we went to respond to, it was like in Tomodachi, something like that in Japan. And then in 2012, I went to Helmand Province. I think it was probably February to September timeframe of 2012.
Yeah.
I actually think that you guys were you were there. So
yeah. Where were you guys at? Where were you based?
mainly in Musikela. We were in the Musikela district. I was in Shergazi for quite a while. And then we bounced around.
So that experience, I'm guessing, was positive for you. Any major stories or experiences there, or what kind of propelled you to continue to want to stay in and pursue the special operations community?
You know, working in the sniper platoon there, we were so comfortable with our small team, and we could be self-sustaining, going on mountains, doing overwatch, providing whatever it is that the rifle platoons needed, and then getting integrated in with them, doing leave behinds and whatnot. I did feel a greater sense of responsibility watching just, I'm going to say, a normal grunt, a rifleman, in their planning process and what they have to consider. It's kind of follow the dude in front of you, understand where your sectors of fire are, and take orders. In a sniper platoon working in smaller teams, you're actually challenged with a little bit more. You have to think outside the box. You have to think for yourself. And there was times that I could really see that providing Overwatch, guiding or advising squad leaders as a lance corporal. So I felt like from the start I had already been in a position that I can lead from anywhere. And I just wanted to continue that pathway. Like I didn't want to settle and just continue taking the basic level tasks.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's powerful. And for those of you guys that may not understand, the squad leader in the Marine Corps may be a sergeant or corporal even. And so what Nick's saying is, as a lance corporal, he was there helping to advise and lead, right? These other individuals who may have been of higher rank than them. And so the military is a rank-driven organization, but especially in the Marine Corps, we have a tenet and philosophy of what we call decentralized command. And so, that plus understanding that different people have different vantage points and can offer insight, and whoever has the most information should be the one being able to make those types of decisions. And so what you were saying actually made me think of another lesson that I had learned when I was at the infantry officers course. One of our instructors was a guy named Brian Chantosh, and he was a legend to us and a lot of the Marine Corps as well. He was a Navy Cross recipient for actions that he had performed in Fallujah in 2004, I believe. And he came back and he was working as an instructor. And one of the things he said was, you're always leading, even if you're not in charge. Right. And what he meant by that was that through your example, through your influence, even if you're not in charge and you're not the commander on paper, you still can lead. Right. And you can have that aspect. So it was a really interesting story. And I'm glad you reminded me of that memory. It was a lot of good memories with him.
Yeah. And that saying right there, it's perfect, because no matter what level you are, there's somebody that's watching you that is inspired by the actions that you're taking. You might not even know it, and they'll probably never tell you about it. And so I think that's like always being a professional, no matter what. I think that's like one thing that's stuck with me, because you just never know who's watching you. And like how we learned going through the assessment and selection for MARSOC is like, you're always being assessed. Like it never stops. So
yeah,
I think that's a great thing to live by.
For sure. Yeah. And I think I would argue that's probably the hallmark of a true profession, right? Of a true professional is, taking ownership and understanding that any minute of the day, right? Any second of the day, you're on, right? And the things that you do outside of work, the things that you do all day, they matter, right? They add up. Every decision you make, those details matter. And, you can make a choice every second of every day, right? You're presented with choices, and the decisions you make matter, right? Even the small ones when you're not working 9 to 5, right? And I think that's something, whether, you're a doctor, a lawyer, a judge, or, we like to consider ourselves in the military, right? Especially in special operations community professionals, right? And we have an oath that we follow and these sorts of things. And so, yeah, that's really powerful. Awesome. Well, cool. Yeah. And came back, put your package in. So you were a corporal at the time.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And went through assessment and selection. So what do you remember about assessment and selection and ITC and everything?
So assessment and selection was, I felt comfortable because I had just been doing a lot of land nav, a lot of rucking around, or land navigation, a lot of marching, a lot of running. So I felt prepared. I felt like I was pretty good at swimming until you get there and you get in the pool, you get in some beehives, and you're like, oh man, what did I sign up for? But it was that challenge, and it was the camaraderie, the team camaraderie that was there that just keeps you going. So assessment and selection, it was really good. I got placed in situations that, as a young Marine, being in only 3 years at this point, maybe it was 2.5 years. No, it was 3 years. I just hit my 3-year mark. I didn't think that I would be in these situations yet. So, I mean, there's very complex problems that they put you in during these assessment and selection courses that they see how we react, and very well that there's second and third order effects to the way that you speak to anyone. So that was very interesting very early on in my career, but it was just one of those things that just continued to push me, and it was like, wow, this is something that I really enjoy doing. I like being challenged in those ways. And then
I'll stop you before you move there. But the question for you, but I don't know if they keep records on this, but you may have been like the youngest guy ever to go to selection in the Marine Corps, right? Because graduate high school early, 2 years later, you're at selection. There was a while, obviously, they had really young guys coming straight out of boot camp or SOI to go for like a very short period, but we don't do that anymore. And so, so even just
young,
having the maturity to make it through you were what, 19 or 20 when you went through?
20.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if for nothing else, just because, like you said, the maturity and the life skills you had to exhibit to be successful there, um, are a testament to your maturity and your professionalism, obviously, because otherwise you wouldn't have been selected. And for those of you who don't know, the selection process is a lot of psychological screening and mental screening. And so it's physically demanding, but the physical challenge is designed to eat away at you and expose your character ultimately. And, you put in some very complex dynamic situations. And, frankly, as a 19 or 20-year-old, right, I don't know. I'd like to think I had the same skill. I obviously don't, can't say one way or the other, but that's awesome. So amazing that you made it through at that time.
Thanks. Yeah, it was just crazy on that side of the things when going through assessment and selection, being placed out into the woods and saying a very particular set of phrases during that. You say, I'm right here and I'm going to go over here. And I remember a time going from trying to find one point and learning about backstops. And a backstop is one thing that you use on the map, and you say, if I have reached this certain point, I've gone too far. Now I'm going through these farmlands, and I end up reaching something that looked like what my backstop was, and I felt an immediate just a hit of I don't even know how to explain it. I felt so defeated. And I look at my map, I study it, and I just sit down. I just sit there for a while and I try to collect my thoughts. I get up and I realize that I am completely lost. And I had no idea where I was. I didn't know where I was on my backstop, and I just had to sit there and just collect my thoughts. I might have yelled a little bit. Who knows? There was nobody around. But, taking that second and breathing and looking up at the sky and thinking to myself, like, I wouldn't have made it this far if I don't know what I'm doing, and taking that extra second to finally get my bearings about it myself and really focusing on the task at hand again. And luckily I found my way, and I was just barely off. Got to the point and I made it. So
Nice.
yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. And I think there's a psychological or emotional parallel to that as well, right? With backstops and everything. So, but your point of taking a pause and maintaining confidence in yourself when things are tough can help people, all right, to move forward and just breathe, right? Whatever it is, whether it's stopping to take a breath or experiencing gratitude or anything. It's something so simple, but interrupting that cycle of negative thoughts can be transformative for your mindset in those types of high stress situations. And I think especially the maturity side. So the reason why that's even more impactful in that scenario is because you're a young Marine out literally in the middle of nowhere in the woods. And this is a valuable exercise, right? Because if you fail, you're jeopardizing your future career as a special operator and something you've worked for a long time, probably a decade or so, or however long, right? Since you've been watching YouTube videos about Marines to get there. So the stress is high. And if that works for you, I'm sure it can work for other people.
Right.
And so then from there, you got selected, obviously, and then went to ITC?
Yes. So I went to ITC, and, there was definite struggles there. You checking in, meeting people from all over, different walks of life, especially because ITC, individual training course, takes everybody from any different occupation, military occupation. So you'll have an admin guy who has never touched a rifle outside of going to the rifle range or basic knowledge on disassembly. So it's very interesting to watch those types of guys navigate through this special arena. And then you have very senior people who have been on multiple combat deployments who have Valor Awards, who have Purple Hearts already, who have been blown up. And it's like, wow, I am, you immediately become humbled by the amount of just effort everybody from every walk of life has put in to get there. And then I myself was just like when Brian Shantosh told you or taught you that saying about anybody can be a leader even if they're not in charge, it's like I met a really good friend who was an admin guy. And at the time, as a infantry marine having 2 deployments, I was like, I kind of know something, but I still kept an open mind. And you learn so much from just even somebody that doesn't even have an infantry background because of how diverse our skill sets are. Everyone contributes there. So I thought that was really cool. And you see it from day one in the training course. Everyone's contributing, everyone's got a task, everyone will end up making the mission happen, and it'll be that much more successful. But for me, the physical and mental part, it was just as much of a demand as anything else. And I had to take it day by day. It was definitely hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the grind, right? And one of the lessons that they teach you there, right, is it never ends, right? And just because you graduate doesn't mean you get to relax, right? Like you start working harder, right? And it just gets progressively harder and harder entire time you're in your career. And that was a pretty important lesson to learn. And I think what you said about diversity and backgrounds and experiences is awesome. I think that's one of the key strengths of MARSOC and the Marine Special Operations Command and the Raider community is from the beginning, we're involved in those sorts of activities with a variety of people from some of the most diverse and varied backgrounds. But instead of trying to hold that against someone because they don't have the same experiences, right, we use it as a strength and turn it into a strength collectively because they have skills that they bring to the fight that we may not have had otherwise, right? And exactly. So that admin guy, when you get your DTS reports crammed back down your throat, right? Like, call him up and he's going to square you away and hook it up. So
that's right.
Same thing with like Motor T and everybody else. But it's, I'm joking, but it's not a joke, right? Because seriously, in a lot of the more elite units, sometimes they'll they may have a chip on their shoulder because you're not from the same walk of life they are or have the same credentials or the same experience or anything else. And so I think it's been one of the strengths of the community in my mind, and our team in my limited time in the community was something we tried to foster, is a sense of collaboration amongst the diverse group of individuals. And then after ITC, you've been in 2nd Raider Battalion for your entire time, or?
Correct. Yeah. So I ended up doing the basic language course, 6 months of basic modern standard Arabic, and that was a very challenging 6 months. I never thought that I would learn another language, and then especially Arabic. I did not see that one coming, but it was interesting to say the least. And it's actually kind of cool because you learn so much about the culture as well that you're about to immerse in. At the time, as a student, you don't understand a lot of the things that you're doing, but it definitely all has a purpose in the end. So as soon as I was done with, so I would say that when I was in basic language course, one of my first, I would say, life-changing events happened when we were very close to graduating. We had already figured out what battalion we were going to and what company we were going to. I got assigned to 2nd Raider Battalion. At the time, it was still MSOB, so it was 2nd Marine Special Operations Battalion, Team 2. So I was already assigned to them. And then I talked to the team chief. They say they're going down to Florida for a training event. And this was in March of 2015 when we lost our first large group of Raiders to a tragic training accident down there. The helicopter crashed at night during a training exercise and killed 7 Raiders from 8231. So it was Marine Special Operations Team from hotel company team 1. My team was there accompanying them, and I had a lot of my guys immediately responding, getting on the Zodiacs and diving for the guys on the crash. So it was interesting checking into the team. The funerals had just ended. There was, quite a lot of tension and just a lot of emotions running around the battalion. So it was definitely an eye-opening thing to check into. So that was probably my first. That definitely was my first insane introduction to the second or to the special operations world.
Yeah. Yeah. What was, I want to unpack that a little bit. I'm interested to hear what that was like because I was on the West Coast. So I was with the 1st Marine Raider Battalion and, we saw it from afar, but having, the ability to check into a unit after you graduate and go through language training. And obviously you weren't part of the team. You weren't down there in that mission at that time just yet, but what was that like?
So being here a while now, like you see how close you get to certain people. You see how tight teams get. And coming into a team that had just lost guys that they had just previously deployed with, it was very eye-opening in the sense that like you see the loss for a brother firsthand with a complete outsider's view. So it was like I can see the pain in a lot of these guys' faces, and it didn't hit me then. I just saw a hardened warrior because they had just got back from deployment not long before that, and then losing those guys. My team had also lost their team chief early in 2014, Master Sergeant Aaron Torian. So
Hmm.
he got killed on that deployment, and then they get back and lose these guys. So it was just a rough time for the hotel company guys. So it was just intense getting there as a brand new guy, minding my P's and Q's, and the next thing you know, it's like these guys have just been through a lot, and all I want to do is work. And it was I think a lot of them were hurting pretty bad, and not that they would take anything out on dudes, but it just made training that much more serious because there was no real play about their attitudes. It was like, we're doing this for a purpose because there's lives at risk. So, it was
Yeah.
just one of those like really real things to walk into. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So Captain Shaw was one of my classmates from the Naval Academy. He was the team commander that was on that mission and lost and lost his life and made the sacrifice during training. And I think from what I saw from the outside and our history as a community, that was the first major catastrophic training event that we had. And so if you think about the numbers, we're in these small teams, like you're saying, Nick, right? We're in these small teams of 14 Marines and sailors, and in an instant in training, after you get back from a very chaotic and intense combat deployment, half your team has now passed away. And so I can understand why they were very intense and serious about moving forward with training and those sorts of things. And did you see any strategies or any people that utilize mental strategies or were able to move forward from that event more successfully than others? Or like what did you guys do? Were guys taking advantage of the resources that were offered, or in so much as like chaplains, psychologists, therapists, mental health professionals, or like how did the community or that team and that community specifically kind of rally together to move forward and continue, preparing for their next mission?
Right. So from my point of view, this is when I first witnessed the stigma within the special operations community, because there has just been an insane tragedy that happened. And you see some guys that will deal with it on the dark side of things and hit the bottle, and only talk about it when they have several drinks, and then it turns into dark emotions coming out. And then you have the other guys who, just push it down, don't talk about it, don't even think about it. Well, from the outsider's perspective, it looks like they're not thinking about it, but kind of recluse in. And then you got the other guys who will actually use those things that they have learned and that trauma that they have just experienced as motivation to keep pushing them. But then you have just the overall view of things where, it's just like, I'm not going to go get help. I'm just going to keep pushing. I'm just going to keep doing what I do. I'll deal with it whenever it comes up. And I don't know if anybody really used any resources. I know at that time, like, you're going so fast, the workups, the training cycles, they just don't stop unless you prioritize yourself. So for me, my team, we were always going, and I didn't see really anybody take a break ever. So yeah, that was just from my perspective on that first tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a good part of the culture, but it's also bad, right? I think, we, from day one, you have to put the team first always. But the line that sometimes is hard and to a detriment is being able to take care of yourself, right? So you can be an effective contributing member of the team and being able to communicate and talk about these things or unpack these things. It's almost expected or is the norm, right? When things happen, just for people to immediately compartmentalize and just push, right? And push forward and deal with it later. And then sometimes that's a necessity, right? In certain combat scenarios and everything else and everything, all that. But it comes at a cost, I think. Eventually you can't bury it forever, right? Like you have to deal with it at some point. And the longer that you go putting those things, in certain boxes or compartments, the more challenging it may be and the longer it may be affecting you, right? Before you can move forward in a more healthy way. And I don't say that to be negative about anything. I was the same way. I didn't want to deal with my own injury for years, right? Mentally and psychologically, but it came at a cost, right? It came at a cost to me. And it's kind of one of the good and bad things I think about what we try to ingrain in the community.
Absolutely.
You guys deployed probably what, a year after that, or
We
18 months or so?
deployed 8 months after that. So I was pretty fortunate. I got to the team and got to deploy fairly quick. Maybe it was 7 months. Either way, it was pretty quick. We had a pretty cool workup. Well, for me, anyways, my first training exercise was a dirt bike course over here at this local sand pit, basically. But it was like this really cool camping facility, a lot of trails. Guys
Oh
bring
yeah.
their grills out. They bring all these dirt bikes and M Razors and ATVs. And I get there and I show up and I'm like, this is special operations. Like, this is so cool. We grill out, we camp out. Like, nobody's wearing like uniforms. We're putting kit on. We're going driving around at night. Like, this is so awesome. And that was my introduction to it. And I got pretty spoiled on that first workup. We did a lot of cool stuff.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. And a lot of people, they may not understand how awesome it is, right? Once you make it to the teams and being in a team, there's arguably nothing better than that, right? Being in a special operations team, training to go to war or being in war with them, right? And you can do some fun stuff sometimes. So even though you're working hard, right, you're out riding dirt bikes 18 hours a day. It's a pretty awesome job, right?
it is. It definitely has its perks.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then where'd you guys deploy to?
So our first deployment was to Kirkuk in 2016. It was before the major push into Hawija and into Mosul. Actually, our team kind of set the conditions for those border expansions, which was really fascinating to be a part of. Watching the intelligence with other cycles just integrating and making something out of nothing. It it was just insane to see like the special operations hub really doing what they do. I was completely mind blown to see like the work that was put in to do that. I'm trying to keep it on a good like on a unclass level, so I'm sorry if I'm stumbling over words. But
No, it's all good.
so what was wild is when I joined the Marine Corps and I became a mortarman. I did not I did not really so I didn't want to be a mortarman. I took it seriously because I like to be good at my job, and
Yeah.
so I learned it to the best I could. And it paid off because as soon as we get to Iraq, we see, well, this is how the war is happening right now. We need these long distance mortars. So we fell in on some 81 millimeter mortars and 120 millimeter mortars. And we had some pretty good days with those guns out there. We got to shoot over, I think I shot over 300. No, I shot over 150 120 mortars on a single mission. And I, man, talk about a
It's intense.
headache.
Yeah, bro.
But it was definitely good, like standing in a massive hole where your base plate's just sinking down, and it was a good time.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. And the unclassed version, I think, of that story, if I just sum it up, I wasn't there, but I followed whatever's in open source, right? I'm a dinosaur, so I don't have access to any information other than what's in the newspapers and everything else. But the Islamic State group and other, extremist organizations were taking hold, and there was a coordinated effort by, with, and through a lot of Iraqi security forces and Iraqi special forces to retake Mosul, which had become kind of a bastion of enemy activity. And so one of the guys that I do know well, Andy Christian, colonel, and that was his last deployment, was taking a task force command out there to help support, and they were able to kind of wedge their way in to support some of those activities. So was he out there when you were there, or did he come after you guys had left?
I think he came right after we left.
Gotcha.
So he got to
Yeah,
actually initiate and get in there.
Yeah. And so to paint the situation a little bit, there's, not large scale combat going on with Americans there, but there's special operations teams there advising all of the people that we'd help train and equip there in Iraq who are fighting for their own security. And so they're executing these missions, and guys like Nick and other Marine Raiders and Army Green Berets and SEALs and Air Force folks are out setting the conditions for success to, win that battle. It's the Battle of Mosul. You can probably read a lot of details about it online. It's probably on Wikipedia or anywhere else you can see. But the Battle of Mosul in 2016 was a pretty, from what I understand, a pretty successful engagement and a really good recent example of how we can leverage special operations units for an asymmetric impact on the battlefield. And so just with sending, a few hundred special operators, American special operators over there who can partner with and train with and support, Iraqi brigades or thousands and thousands of Iraqi combat troops, they were able to go and retake Mosul from an entrenched enemy there who had been there reinforcing the city and fighting positions and, and going through that endeavor. So jump in or correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, Nick, but that was kind of my open source on class understanding of from the high level.
Yeah,
Mosul.
that was perfect. Yeah.
And you're there just dropping 120s.
Yeah.
150 times in 3 minutes. So that's intense. Yeah. That's good. That's good that you were a mortarman. It's good you were there. So
yeah. It definitely paid off.
And so that time you were just a snuffy, or what was your role? Were you a system element leader or mortarman?
I was an element member, basically just the mortarman. That was my task. I mean, a few times I got to hang out up in with the snipers and help them out, but my role basically was getting on that gun because it was super effective everywhere we went.
Mm, nice.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Awesome. And then you came back and got ready for another cycle, right? So just
Right.
tell me about that.
So now I'm still on the same team, and I'm an assistant element leader at this time. We start our workup, and during so when I get back, I get to go to our MARSOC's advanced sniper course, and then I got to go to the military freefall course. So talk about like the best training schools phase you could go to. That's basically what I got offered. So it was a really good time. But you know, once again, we hit the ground running. We go 100 miles an hour the entire workup, and I had my second major tragedy happen on July 10th, 2017. A KC-130 crashed over Mississippi and killed 16 total people, and there was 6 Marine Raiders and 1 SARC, which is a special amphibious reconnaissance corpsman, that were all with Hotel Company. So it was the exact same company from the crash in 2015. One guy was on my team. There was another guy that was on Team 4, and then the rest were from 8231, which was the same team that had those other guys perish in 2015. And I think you know, aside from it, us losing 7 friends immediately, again, this one hit me a little bit harder because I get a phone call that night telling me about what had just happened. And my team chief at the time told me the reason why he's calling me to inform me about this is that I am on the paperwork of one of the Marines to go notify his wife. And he told me that Talon Leach, who at the time was one of my best friends, I had lived with him and his wife. I had spent countless nights, days, times, whatever it is. Like, this guy was a great human being. Talon was one of the guys that had been killed, and now I have to go notify his wife about the incident. And man, that was like a turning point in my life. I was like, this is too crazy. This is way too close to home. Like, this is what in the hell is going on? I was shocked. Like, how does a training accident like this happen? It's like, all these questions running through my head at this point. It's like you expect, it's shitty to say, but you expect to lose guys in combat. We don't expect necessarily to lose guys at home, and not of that magnitude. That's just blew my mind. So it was really hard to recover after that one because the funerals were so spaced out that you didn't want to miss one, but you also can't take 2 months off of training. We still have a job to do. We still have to be combat ready because we're 6 months away from deployment now. So that was definitely tough, traveling all over the U.S. once again for funerals, and yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And especially to have it happen in the same team, right? In the same company, in the same guys, right? Yeah. It's terrible. And I'd imagine that, some of those same guys that were significantly affected by the first incident were probably there as well and knew those same guys and were, so this has happened to those individuals twice, right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
on the question that you asked earlier about people using resources and like what guys did to cope with it and did they go get help, this is when it directly happened to me, and I was that guy. Like, I'm tough enough, I can handle this, I can do it on my own. I don't have time really to just mourn all day. I don't have time to think about the guys that we just lost. We have a job to do. And so I just kept pushing, just kept working. And, you know, it's easy to, it's easy to say now that, like, you know, I just kept going. In the time, you know, it's like you'd be hard pressed to find a single night where you don't think about it, where you're not struggling. It's like it's a task every day to keep pushing through something like that. But yeah, so I didn't I didn't at that time use any resources that I was necessarily provided. So it was a definitely a struggle.
Yeah. And I think to your point, right, our work can be engrossing, right? You have to engross yourself in these tasks fully, which for even a momentary period of time can help take your mind off of other things, right? Because, you know, if you're prepping a breaching charge or loading your weapon or doing these other things, right, like high risk stuff, it helps to consume you. And so even, you know, it's not the ideal strategy, right? But idle time can be really tough because you have time to think and process and to do these things. I remember that's with similar instances, you know, combat incidences where guys are getting lost and having these issues or dealing with injury or trauma or near misses. It's hard to get your mind off of. It's tough, but yeah, it's bad. And unfortunately, obviously, you know, you guys carried forward, right, and just continued moving and went to execute the mission, and so rebuilt the team, right, and then deployed again and
Yep.
move
So
forward.
this time we went to Jordan. We had a 6 month deployment there. There wasn't. We were mainly just training the partner force there, and you know that was a good experience in itself too, because that essentially is what we do. We make sure that other nations are ready and they have themselves prepared to fight battles that hopefully they don't have to actually be a part of. And so that was one of the things that we did there. We got to work with a maritime unit, so doing some amphibious operations. We got to work with some other special missions units out there. And so we did get to participate in quite the diversity of training. We did a lot of free fall operations. We did a lot of more mortar operations. We did mountain training. We did sniping. It was
Yeah,
actually a really awesome opportunity. And not
yeah,
only that, but we got to go visit Petra and all sorts of other really cool sightseeing stuff. So that was a neat deployment.
yeah. Not bad. Yeah, yeah. I was fortunate on my second deployment on the Mew. Spent a lot of time in Jordan. Got to go to Kasadik and got to go to Aqaba and Petra and all over the place. And you know, I was a company
Yeah.
XO, so I was out in civilian clothes, you know, doing like advanced party stuff, planning training, meetings and stuff. So we'd rent, you know, fly in, stay in the hotel, rent a Land Cruiser, and
Yeah.
cruise around the country and got to see everything. And so after that deployment, I came back and bought a Land Cruiser because they were awesome.
Okay.
And and had an affinity for Jordan because it was really cool. So
Yeah.
I had a great time. One of my favorite countries, probably my favorite, one of my favorite countries, Muslim countries in the Middle East by far. So
I would
it was awesome.
definitely go back as a
Yeah,
civilian.
yeah,
I think it's beautiful.
yeah, yeah. We had a blast. I stayed a lot in Aqaba and some in Amman, and obviously even better for you because you know the language, right? So you can cruise around and get around town and order shawarma
Ish.
and
Yeah. That's about all I could do is order shawarma.
no,
No, it's just the dialects are totally different too, so it just makes things a little more difficult, but they understand a little bit of what I was saying.
yeah. I tried to learn Arabic and I spent, you know, most of my first deployment in Iraq talking to Iraqis, and so I had like the Iraqi dialect a little bit, and
Yeah.
but literally the first word out of my mouth, they look at me and they're like, "You redneck," you know, like what's the deal, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, awesome. And so did that deployment and then came back and right back in the team, and you were assistant element leader that time, or
Yes, correct.
okay, and so you come back and this time you element leader, or are you still an assistant element leader for this next one?
So this one we came back, I was an element leader. We had a few guys, few returners, but on this time it was almost a fresh start. We had a lot of new guys come to the company, come to the teams. And so yeah, as an element leader, I got to finally learn planning, execution, got to finally take charge and raise an element, get ready for combat. At this time we learned about a couple new missions coming out that it was kind of a battle, if you will, for best team gets the new shiny mission. So once again, we were doing a lot of training, trying to outdo the teams, and make ourselves look like we're the best. So it only made
Jock,
everybody else better because we're all just working super hard now. And yeah,
jockeying for position. Yeah,
yeah,
we did the
exactly.
same thing. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I had a bunch of guys on my team, and so in Afghanistan, it was we're doing village stability operations or commando missions,
yeah,
and village stability operations were fun, and that's what we got assigned to. And 2 out of the 3 teams were doing that. But we had one team that would be the commando mission, and and they had a pretty good quality of life. A very different mission set, and one that's more admirable. So these commandos, side story, commando missions, they're similar to airborne rangers or aerial, strike missions where an Afghan battalion will be trained and you'll support them. And so you go for 48 to 72 hours out into the middle of nowhere to go fight and then come back and you're inside friendly lines. And whereas village stability operations, you get pushed out in the middle of nowhere with a small team by yourself, limited resources, but it's 24/7 on the clock, living in, an area that in our case didn't have running water or any, real infrastructure at all. So no stoves. Our cook was cooking over wood, like literally breaking wood for wood fires every night. Still did an amazing job, but we're getting scrawny. Whereas the commando team's getting giant and jacked and huge, like tan, and then a swimming pool and all kinds of stuff. So that rivalry that you're talking about is pretty cool because even throughout our workup, they're like, oh yeah, you 2 guys prep for VSO, and some of my more savvy senior guys are like, hey sir, like we gotta figure out how to get that commando mission.
yeah,
Like we gotta up our game. Just do better than this other team in the house. Do better, and here they'll switch it up. They could switch it up. And we're like, all right, man, we'll see.
yeah.
So it didn't happen. So yeah, yeah, it's funny. So for you guys, was it different regions, or did you guys all go to the same place? And or what was the difference?
So there was still 2 missions to Iraq, and then there was a third mission that was going to Afghanistan again. And they were going to do something that was pretty similar to the old commando missions,
Gotcha.
just on a different level with some different people. But, they, during our workups, there was teams over there that were getting into some gunfights, doing, what guys want to go do. They were doing direct action raids, pretty much just like the commando mission. So with a little bit more assets. And the other teams were going to Iraq, which just didn't seem to be where the action was at the time until August 10th, 2019 happened, and we lost Copenhagen, Gunnerstarn Copenhagen. There was a mission up there in northern Iraq, and he was killed, and another EOD tech was shot. They lost some partner force guys, and so it was just like, wow, like, I mean, hey, this goes to show there's things happening everywhere still. Like we can't get complacent. We can't settle. We can't, like we got to work hard no matter where we're going. And what came out of that is we weren't the ones chosen to go to Afghanistan, which was completely fine because we, told our guys, like, it's okay. We're still going to a combat zone. You can see what just happened. So we keep your heads up. Like, we still got a job to do. So now we go back to northern Iraq, and I'm in Mosul this time. We actually well, when we first showed up, we were in Mosul City, and there was a lot of weird stuff in the world going on with the missiles coming over Iraq, hitting airfields and stuff close to where we were, hitting random bases. So it was definitely a tense time, especially for the families letting everybody go, trying to get the other families home. So it was intense getting there, and we actually had to shut down the base that was in the inner city and move all the way up to the Mosul Dam. So that was interesting. I haven't been a part of any logistical breakdown like that before, so it was pretty intense. And once again, like, using the abilities that we have to, figure all that stuff out. It was fascinating to watch. Um,
Yeah. So
yeah.
you guys moved up to Mosul, and at that time you were advising. And was there significant enemy threat, or what was the situation like when you were, the day to day operations for the most part outside of fending for yourselves logistics wise?
Yeah, so ISIS pretty much had gone into like hibernation mode. It seemed like you could hardly find them. It took a lot of hunting, if you will, both um, on both sides of the spectrum. So we did a lot um, of work with our partner force, really enabling them to use the assets that they have to be able to find the enemy and keep them out of the city. So we wanted ISIS out of the city, kept them out of there. And then at that point, it was kind of hunting higher level targets, is what it seemed like. So we would do some confidence targets with our partner forces using the information that they have, and we would assist them to a certain point, still not fully being able to go on target um, in most cases. And then in some cases, the larger missions we were able to accompany. It just really depended on what the priority level was for the targets that we were going after, until we got tasked with a very large SOTIF level operation where, yeah. So
Yeah. So just to make it clear, the one thing I'll point out, what you were talking about, is um, when we're in these places conducting these missions, at certain times there'll be guidelines or rules of engagement that provide some specific guidance for how and what you can and can't do as an American. And so what Nick was just saying was they weren't allowed to go on the objective or within a certain distance of the objective with their partner forces. And so their partner forces had gotten to a certain point. And so now that, the theory is that they're self-sufficient, or that they're in the lead and leading all these operations, you can go and you can support and watch. But, if you are going into a house to catch a bad guy or going into one of these areas, Americans won't go. It'll be Iraqis only, or your partner forces only. And so I don't know what the specific rules of engagement were for you guys, or how that worked out, but that's kind of the basics of how that works in some ways. As you're working to relinquish more and more control and take a back seat to let the other nation and their partner forces step up and be self-sufficient.
right. Yeah, I mean, that was really the gist of it. Most of the times we couldn't go in with them until they said everything's clear. Now we're allowed to go in there and help advise a little bit more on different techniques for different things.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So you guys are there, having good effect. And then how long was it before, you were in these, very, very kinetic engagements, and when you got injured?